What a weekend for the Pacers. Tyrese Haliburton returns. Bennedict Mathurin starting over Buddy Hield. Jordan Nwora sets a franchise record. The team loses 2 games in dramatic fashion. So much to do, so much to see, so much to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and I am the LeBron of feet of Pacers podcasting or something like that. I don't know what LeBron James was saying. Today on the Pacers front, so much to get to. Crazy weekend. Pacers lose twice. That's the second story of the weekend to me. We'll get to that. Amid all that, Jordan Nwora has the best scoring quarter the Pacers have ever seen. Tyrese Haliburton returns from injury. Buddy Hield goes to the bench. Bennedict Mathurin keeps starting. Miles Turner plays one game and not the other. And I don't even have enough breath to get through all this. And there's 7 games left of the Pacers season. And oh, by the way, the Bulls swept their games over the weekend. So the Pacers playing hopes on life support. Whew. We'll get to that tomorrow. A lot to get to today from the Pacers weekend. That was, starting with, to me, Tyrese Haliburton returning. And it wasn't that he returned. That alone perked me up this weekend. It was that Tyrese Haliburton returned and the Pacers didn't change their lineup back to what it was. Tyrese Haliburton returns Friday against the Celtics. He looked awesome in both of his games, as he does. He starts, and Bennedict Mathurin, stays as the starter at the 2 like he was in Toronto and Charlotte without Haliburton, and Buddy Hield goes to the bench. He played his first 99 games with the Pacers as a starter. Buddy Hield that he was benched for the first time. I don't think it had anything to do with his play. I think it had a lot to do with, and I'm stealing a term that Caitlin Cooper used in her mailbag over the weekend on her Patreon, Basketball She Wrote. Go check it out. Fact finding. Perfect way to describe this from the Pacers' perspective. You got to know more. We talked about the pairing, the Haliburton-Mathurin pairing on Friday. Alex Golden and I did, if you want to listen to that show. Lots of good numbers on that duo. You got to know more about them and what they can be and what they fit with and what they don't fit with. And with the Pacers season at the juncture that it's currently at in terms of wins and losses and spots in the standings, why not go for the younger thing? The Pacers had 2 different starting lineups over the weekend because Miles Turner was injured for their second game of their back-to-back against Atlanta. But either way, combined both games, the 6 players that started, Isaiah Jackson filled in for Turner, were 26 and younger in both games, right? The Pacers clearly on a mission of, sure, elevating your young guys' development, win while developing their goals since the trade deadline. But the fact-finding of fit and exploration and skill growth and all this stuff that matters, while also letting Haliburton come back and be Tyrese Haliburton. Because, look, Tyrese Haliburton came back and played 2 games for the Pacers and looked like the same dude that he's been all season. 19.5 points and 11 assists per game in the 2 games. Some sick passes against the Celtics, some nasty threes, and good plays against the Hawks. Like, we know what this dude can be at his best for this team. The Pacers don't need to learn a lot more about Tyrese Haliburton. What they need is to get data points on how he fits with certain lineups, or how he and Mathurin fit with certain other groups, or how they fit starting, all sorts of other things that go into this beyond just their raw fit together. And so the story of Haliburton starting, to me, was about the rest of the lineups that the Pacers deployed. Now, unique circumstances this weekend, playing one of the best teams in the league and then a wobbling Hawks team, because the starters in Boston, Haliburton, Mathurin, Nembhard, Nesmith, Turner. Good first half, atrocious second half. We'll talk about the games in general in the third segment today. That group was a minus 16 that night. A minus 18, excuse me. That starting 5 was a minus 18 that night. Pacers lost by 25. Biggest loss of the season. I couldn't believe that. Justin Opirak put that in his game story. I was like, really? Biggest loss of the season that night, right? So, what? They just got smoked. The next game, they switch back. They don't switch back. They switch because Turner's out with his back injury. In comes Isaiah Jackson. And that game, +2, right? So minus 16 the starters were over the weekend, but they saw some success with Isaiah Jackson. Their bench got smoked against the Hawks in the plus-minus department outside of Nwora's huge second quarter. But they found a little bit of success there. So minus 16 on the weekend. Mathurin's stats individually very wobbly. And this is one of the things with these Haliburton-Mathurin lineups is about discovery. We'll get to in a second. But it's kind of harder for him to have the ball. That's been a big reason he's come off the bench for most of the season. Either way, on the season now, including the games we saw this weekend, the 5-man lineup of Miles Turner, Aaron Nesmith, Bennedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard, and Tyrese Haliburton, 59 minutes, only 59 minutes. I think that's a big note. That's not very much. That's barely over a full game. -6, 17 games. That's substandard. I think they would like to be a little better, but that's basically a wash, right? 6 points. They've had 4 less possessions than the other team, right? Yeah, that's fine, right? That's acceptable for where this team is, especially because, again, that's all 26 and younger dudes. Now, this weekend, again, that group was terrible against the Celtics. No sugarcoating it, but figuring out more about what that lineup can be is crucial. And it's not just that to me, right? It's not just those 5. It's the zoom out questions. And I put this stuff in a story I wrote about this over the weekend, but like the big thing to me, because Bennedict Mathurin, I don't even think he would say he had a good weekend. 1 for 4 for 2 points against Boston was Bennedict Mathurin. And then against the Hawks, he was 2 for 4 for 4 points, right? Tougher for him to be Bennedict Mathurin when Turner can have the ball and be a threat, and Haliburton has the ball all the time and is a threat, and Nembhard's playing decently well. It's harder for him to get the touches, especially when the second unit reps aren't there. But that's not the big point. The bigger point is, with these groups, you have a third ball handler out there in Nembhard who's playing well and getting these opportunities to play make. How do Mathurin and Haliburton fit with another ball handler like Nembhard? Or even you could include TJ McConnell. They've occasionally played with him. But in general, how does that look? What does that mean for their future? Does that mean they need to be staggered a little more? Does that mean the other 3 players shouldn't be ball handlers? Can Nembhard be that guy himself? He's got 3 more years after this year, at least, under contract with the Pacers and could be a restricted free agent in the future. These are important things to know as soon as possible, right? Can Turner and Nesmith, 2 good defenders, certainly, even Nembhard's a good defender. Is that enough defense to prop up the poor perimeter defense of Mathurin and Haliburton, who will presumably get better on that end, right? Haliburton can read the game very well. His team defense should get better. Mathurin's already pretty good on ball, right? Can that become, is that enough defense around those guys? And I think they actually defended outside of the second half against Boston, especially that third quarter, pretty well as a unit. Jackson in that group also defended pretty well, right? So yeah, you kind of, but you're learning more about what you need, what skills you need. And then the final push of this, and the second part is, does Buddy Hield fit with your bench units? And that's an older bench group now, headlined by McConnell and Hield. But what does Buddy Hield shooting help Jalen Smith? Or Duarte played but re-aggravated his injury. Does he have more space to operate? Or does Jordan Nwora, who, holy moly, had an excellent weekend, does he look any better with more space, right? All sorts of stuff. Isaiah Jackson, who was really good against Boston with 12 and 6. Like, do all these guys fit a little better with Buddy Hield shooting? Who knows what kind of ripple effects this has? But this is what my big takeaway from Tyrese Haliburton starting and returning this weekend was nothing to do with his play, which, again, I feel like I'm shortchanging him. He averaged 20 and 11, basically, this weekend, was an all-star level player instantly against 2 decent East teams and was leading the Pacers on offense. And both of them, again, I don't even think he was as good as he could normally be. He said he was out of rhythm. He was awesome. I think we all knew that was coming. Instead, what we saw is Tyrese Haliburton gaining chemistry and getting answers, fact-finding, to use Caitlin's term again, with new lineups and new stuff. And I think, this is a guess, because there's still 7 games left. Pacers still technically in it, and that lineup did poorly against Boston with Turner in there. But I think you'll see more of this tinkering, experimenting, whatever you want to say, down the stretch of the Pacers' last 7 games. Another hint that is possible, Turner and Haliburton both listed questionable against Dallas tonight with injury management for their injuries. The sore back for Turner, the right ankle sprain for Haliburton. Haliburton played a back-to-back this weekend, right? He presumably his ankle is good, and maybe they'll decide what is and isn't needed for those two, on a given game basis, or what they want to experiment with, all sorts of stuff. But I think getting, like Alex and I talked about a little bit with that duo and the focus of the last 9 games on last Friday's show, finding answers to the extent that you can, or getting more data points to the extent that you can. The Pacers did that over the weekend, even with Haliburton coming back, even with their guy that, now it's 500, but they have a great record when he plays. He makes everybody else better. He's been so good all season, and yet they still showed some tweaks. They still looked toward the future, and that was my big takeaway from Tyrese Haliburton's return over the weekend. Let me know if you're a YouTube watcher. Comment. What do you think of these lineups? What do you think the Pacers should also, if anything, be doing to experiment even further? Or tweet at me at TEastNBA. This podcast at Locked On Pacers. I thought that was noteworthy and interesting. And I thought that the lineup's doing well against Atlanta, but terrible against the Celtics meant I'd like to see more. I think the Pacers would. 2-3 home games this week to figure out a little bit more. It's going to be a weird one tonight with Dallas. We'll, of course, be covering that tomorrow. But in the next segment today, somehow this is a second segment, but the Pacers had a lot of big stuff happen this weekend. Jordan Nwora, franchise record for points in a regular season quarter. Unbelievable performance in Atlanta against the Hawks, specifically in the second quarter. Jordan Nwora and Reggie Miller will now be said in the same sentence several times for the next 10 minutes. Here's why. It's all coming up in a second. Before we talk about that, I got to talk to you guys about PrizePicks. PrizePicks daily fantasy made easy. PrizePicks is a great way to play daily fantasy sports. Super simple concept. Pick 2 to 5 players. Will they go over or under their PrizePicks projection for any stat? Will LeBron, who's back now, more or less than 7.5 rebounds? Kevin Durant, more than 6.5 assists or less, whatever. That's what I love about it. Simple format. You pick 2 to 6 players. You can up to 25 times your money. And it's not against other people. It's just you versus those projections. That's what I think is so fun. You can make your picks in like a minute or less. It's safe. You get your money quickly and operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com. Sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. You deposit $50. PrizePicks gives you $50. You get the idea, but don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks daily fantasy made easy. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, not only are they the Pacers' opponent tonight, but what is going on with the Dallas Mavericks? They're protesting a game. They're not going to win that protest, but they're protesting a game from their loss to the Warriors last week. And then they lost 2 games to the Hornets, and Luka got his 16th tack and is potentially and likely suspended for this game against the Pacers, and they're out of the play-in. The Dallas Mavericks, with Luka Doncic, who made the Western Conference Finals, are not in play-in positioning right now. Locked On Mavs has a lot to cover. You can get it all there. Let's talk about Jordan Nwora, who now will be talked about in the same breath as Pacers' legendary quarter scorers of Reggie Miller and Mike Dunleavy and Karis LeVert, as we trudge on to talk about his amazing, just unbelievable second quarter against the Atlanta Hawks. The headline, the takeaway, it's all the same. 25 points in the second quarter against the Hawks for Jordan Nwora, who finished the game with 33. So a guy who scored 25 points in one quarter, that's on pace to have a Wilt Chamberlain 100 game, finishes with 33, doesn't even get a career high. Not to knock on him at all. The Hawks adjusted, and he was on fire, heat check in this whole quarter. But Jordan Nwora had one of the best quarters I've ever seen from a Pacers player in the second quarter against Atlanta. It was insane. He finishes the frame with the stat line of 25 points on 9 for 11 shooting, 3 out of 4 from deep. He had 4 foul shots. He also had 4 rebounds in the frame, plus 6 to give the Pacers a halftime lead. He had 25 of the Pacers' 39 points in the frame. He got the halftime walk-off interview with Jeremiah Johnson, and he said, he was talking to Lloyd Pierce, like off to the side before the halftime interview, and he said Lloyd Pierce told him this is something he could do every night. He's just got to let the game come to him and do what he does, and that is exactly what he did in the second quarter. I have, if you've been watching the Pacers since the trade deadline, you've seen Jordan Nwora do his thing, right? He's shot the ball well from deep with the Bucks, but he's kind of dribbled a little more and playmaked and explored his inside the arc 2-point game a little more with the Pacers, and the rebounding's been a pleasant surprise too. But you've seen what his offensive palette kind of looks like. And then this quarter happened, and it was nothing like the Jordan Nwora palette we've seen in the weeks leading up to this quarter. He was doing everything. And the word I used in my notes during the game, and I'm going to use it in this segment, is I typed slow death, because he did it over the course of the entire quarter. It wasn't like he had like a Klay Thompson-esque, 12 points in a minute and 10 seconds to buoy this huge quarter. He had the very first points of the second quarter for the Pacers. That was his first 3 points of the game. And then his next bucket he finished the quarter with a bucket for the Pacers as well. He had their last points of the quarter on free throws. So he did it all over the whole quarter to get to these 25 points. And it wasn't, again, that made it bananas to me. He scored in every single way possible for a forward who can dribble a little bit, right? Starts off the quarter with the Jordan Nwora 3, and then his next bucket was a drive to the basket off a shot fake, and then a cut where Chris Duarte hit him with a beautiful pass. And then another cut from McConnell, or he shot faked and got past John Collins on a pass from McConnell. And that, I think he had like 9 or 10 points because he had some free throws at that point. And you're feeling it when you have 10 points in a quarter, right? And then Jordan Nwora started doing something that I've talked about in a way that I thought shouldn't be the case, and it was, right? Rick Carlisle mentioned in Detroit a few weeks ago, and the Pacers were there on a road trip. They're trying to get Nwora a few more like playmaking, put the ball on the floor opportunities. And I've said that's a good idea. Explore what he can do, but don't just throw it to him and let him be a primary where he's running pick and rolls and doing all this stuff. Well, he was so hot in the second quarter that the best thing the Pacers could do was have Jordan Nwora run some pick and rolls. So they threw him the ball at the top of the key. Didn't matter what Atlanta player was guarding him. He would size him up. He would take a dribble to his right. He'd go left around his screen, drill the pull-up three. That was with Jalen Smith setting the screen. A couple possessions later, now Isaiah Jackson's in at center. And Jordan Nwora gets the ball, and he runs the pick and roll, and he comes around the screen, and guess what? He hit another shot coming around the screen. So he was doing literally everything that you could ask a scoring type, playmaking growth type to do. He was hitting threes that he was self-creating. He was running pick and rolls. He was cutting well. He had a few drives to the basket off of shot fakes, leveraging that shot for points. Like he had a couple dunks, getting to the line. Like every single thing he did worked. And he didn't even have to shoot flawlessly to do it. 25 points in the quarter, a Pacers franchise record for a regular season points in a quarter. The regular season's important. 1994, many of you will remember. I don't remember because I was not alive, but Reggie Miller, 25 points in the fourth quarter against the Knicks, Eastern Conference Finals, Game 5 to extend the series. Pacers were up 3-2 at that point. They did not win that series, but an incredible game from Reggie Miller, who finished with 39. That was the last 25-point quarter for the Pacers. That was postseason. Regular season quarter stats have been tracked since, I think, 1996. The Pacers' previous record for points in a quarter belonged to, many will remember, Mike Dunleavy. If you remember the quarter, the perfect quarter, did a whole show on it last August. What if Josh McRoberts didn't shoot to end the perfect quarter? Although he absolutely should have shot. In my eyes, Mike Dunleavy that quarter had 24, did not miss a jump shot. He missed a free throw. He did not miss a shot from the field. That was the Pacers' old record for points in a quarter. In my lifetime covering the Pacers and their recent era of StatMuse tracking quarter stats, the record was Karis LeVert's 22 points in a quarter, which he did twice in his short tenure with the Pacers. 20-point quarters happen sometimes, 25 for the Pacers in the regular season, never. Jordan Nwora now in the record books for the Pacers. He was unreal, and now you have to talk about him like that all the time. He has that sort of potential to go off when he's feeling it or when the matchup's right. And the part of this that matters the most, beyond the things he says, like, look, we all know Jordan Nwora can catch and shoot a little bit and can shot fake and get by a guy. How much can he do with this dribble stuff? Rick Carlisle's talked about exploring it, and he showed it a little bit in this quarter. Like a shot fake and a one dribble or two dribble move to the basket, that's something. But a two dribble or a three dribble player who's creating a little bit, maybe not in isolation all the time, but that's much more valuable. Like that's a totally different skill set and ability. Like that, like Doug McDermott became a much better player when he went from raw off-ball shooter to like, I can come around the Sabonis screen and dribble 3 times and get a layup. And then if you overplay that, I can back cut you. And like, yeah, his defense was not very good, but he was really valuable on offense for the Pacers because he added a couple dribble moves and was not so static to guard. And Nwora adding all this stuff means, look, I'm not comparing the players, but just it adds what you, not only to what you can do, but then it adds that you can work in a counter to the defense, cutting off that new thing. So like the big thing in this quarter to me that Nwora played was the pick and roll plays where he was literally dribbling around a screen and wasn't set up by someone else necessarily, or wasn't reliant on a well-timed cut. He was doing the work to create the shots, and he was still scoring in that way. Again, not something I think the Pacers say, yeah, we can rely on this in a key moment, but you know what? Back last couple seconds of the shot clock winding down, if he has to be the guy with the ball dribbling around a screen, maybe that isn't the craziest idea ever. And he was so good in this quarter and continues to show at the Pacers, like they said they had interest in him before, both maybe in the draft that he was in, but also in free agency in the past. He said that that existed, but I was a restricted free agent. Now the Pacers have him. He's got another year under contract, looking like certainly an interesting piece for the Pacers to explore this season and the next season. And this quarter obviously is going to always be a talking point for him now when he's discussed as a piece and what he did for the team this year. Remember that one quarter? Remember how good he was? But he legitimately has shown a lot more scoring ability than just shooting with the Pacers. And this quarter, a record-breaking quarter, Basketball Reference queries forever will have Jordan Nwora's name right above Mike Dunleavy's in the Pacers regular season scoring quarters. Will be there forever. It was fantastic. It got the Pacers a halftime lead that they then gave away. That is the third and final story of this Pacers weekend. There are 2 losses. We'll do standings watch tomorrow, but 2 crushing losses. 2 good first halves and 2 awful second halves. How did this happen for the Pacers? Who was good? Who wasn't? What do they need to do better in their homestand this week against 3 pretty good teams? We'll close out with all that today. Before we get to that, though, got to talk to you guys about Built Bar. It's still March, and the Built March Madness bracket is here. You have a favorite bar or puff. If you're me, it's peanut butter brownie. Now's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorite flavors. I'll be voting for, like I said, the peanut butter brownie. And if you want the Pacers to win, then you'll be voting for my favorite bar. 2, support your team, support your favorite Built Bars. And when you vote your favorite bar or puff, you'll be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built Bars. Not only that, but 1 lucky fan will get a 12-month subscription to Built to have the best bars delivered directly to your door for a whole year. You've got to try Built, the best protein bars ever. They're so good, you won't even know they're good for you. What makes them so good? Well, they're all high in protein, low in sugar, covered in 100% real chocolate. So run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box. While you're there, you can vote every day in March. So hop in and support your pick, BuiltMarchMadness.com. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Lakers is the way to go. Obviously, they are dominating the headlines for many reasons, but one of them being LeBron James played over the weekend. Stunning random return to the lineup when it seemed like he was only going to play the last couple games of the season. He was back, came off the bench for the Lakers, and had the funniest quote ever about the LeBron James of feet. And he's back. Big for the Lakers push. The Kamenetsky twins will have all you need to know about LeBron's return and the Lakers at this stage of the season at Locked On Lakers here at Locked On Pacers. What a strange weekend for the Pacers. Let's talk about their game against the Celtics, and then I'll just copy and paste the things I say to talk about their game against the Hawks. Pacers and Celtics. Pacers down by 2 at the end of the first quarter. Tyrese Haliburton's back. The lineup looks different, but the first quarter goes pretty well. Haliburton had was scoring well in the first quarter. I think he had 6 assists as well. He had 7 assists in the first quarter. Miles Turner had 9 points. They were rolling to start this game. They looked good. Their bench came in the second quarter, did a good job. TJ McConnell was looking great running the team, and they were down 5 at halftime. I guess a very good Celtics team, right? This is what the Pacers wanted to look like with the new lineup. Mathurin, second on the team in minutes in that half. Halliburton gets to halftime in his first game back with 9 and 7. Turner has 15 points. Like, everything looks pretty good for the Pacers. Even if you lose, you're down 60 to 55 at halftime. You feel good about that, right? Good start to the Pacers in this little exploratory phase that they're in at the moment. And then they score 40 points in the second half and give up 60 to lose by 25, which was, like I said earlier, I can't believe I didn't know this. Thank you, Dustin Dopirak, for getting that. Their biggest loss of the season. Atrocious, abysmal, whatever your favorite word is to describe a basketball team playing poorly second half for the Pacers. Single thing that was going well fell apart in the second half. They turned it over a bunch. They couldn't shoot well at all, right? Their top 3 bench guys in terms of general creation. Buddy Hield over 5 in that second half. TJ McConnell over 3. Jordan Nwora over 2. They got decent production from Isaiah Jackson. That's it of the regular rotation guys. They cleared their bench with 7.5 minutes to go. So we got a ton of James Johnson, George Hill time to close this game. Pacers got blown off the floor. The big change, their defense totally let up. They were playing in the half court so much with this group, and the Celtics were scoring with ease. Tatum was killing the Pacers early in the frame. Jaylen Brown had a 15-point half, right? They gave up 60 in both halves, so it sounds weird to say that their defense was the game-changing thing. But again, there was 6 minutes of Luke Cornett, 2 minutes of J.D. Davison at the end of this game. Like, the garbage time part kind of clouds what happened. And the Pacers offense certainly wasn't good. They shot 34% in the second half and had 9 turnovers, but they are not as good in the half court as they are in transition and running. And it's easier to do that when you're getting stops. And even if you're only getting intermittent stops, at least you're engaged when you're doing it sometimes. And then you're ready to run out and grab it and push because it's working, right? All this stuff that is part of the mental game was not there for the Pacers in this half, and they got blown out. And losing to the Celtics, expected. The line for this game was like Celtics -10 or something ridiculous. Like, getting blown out in this game, not the craziest thing for the Pacers. Now let's talk about the Hawks game. Go back 2 minutes, listen to what I just said about the Celtics game and reapply it to the Hawks game. A few little differences, though. Pacers down 4 at the end of the first quarter. Then Jordan Nwora did that thing I just talked about in the second quarter. Pacers were actually ahead by 3 at halftime this time, and then get the doors blown off of them in the second half again. Right, the start of this game, the Isaiah Jackson starting for Turner, so it's going to look a little different, and the bench is going to look different now too. Chris Duarte was back for the first time in 5 games. Right, what's going to go on in this first half? Well, Andrew Nembhard had 10 points in like 2 minutes, and Haliburton had 9 points and 9 assists at halftime. Isaiah Jackson had 10 points on 5 of 6 shooting at the break. Nwora, of course, had 25. Pacers scored 74 in the first half. That should be a win. A lot of they're up 3. They're up 2, excuse me. They're up 2 at the half. And then Trae Young got ejected, and it was 84-84, and Haliburton hit the free throw on the tech when Trae Young checked out of the game. They were winning, and then they just got the absolute doors blown off of them for the rest of the game. And once again, I personally would point to defense. The Hawks, without Trae Young, scored 71 points in the second half. DeJounte Murray, 16 of those points. He was getting to the rim whenever he wanted. And that's where this game kind of changed, is it felt like the Hawks, when Trae Young got ejected, said, all right, you know what? If we can't have our key creator out there, we're just going to drive to the basket as hard as we can every single possession. And DeJounte Murray was a key part of that. But they got a lot of buckets at the rim from Capella, and Bogdan Bogdanovic did a pretty good job driving. And John Collins had a good game. I wrote in my pregame story that I thought he'd be a tricky matchup for the Pacers, and he was. And Sadiq Bey couldn't miss, and Garrison Matthews couldn't miss. And all of a sudden, ex-Pacer Aaron Holiday couldn't miss. And the Pacers were toast because these driving kicks for the Hawks were just absolutely killing it. They had 15 second-half assists, and the Pacers' defense fell apart, which seeped into their offense. They shot well enough from 3. They made all their free throws, right? It wasn't as bad, but again, 8 turnovers. That's not going to work as well when they're playing in the half court as much. So 56 second-half points for the Pacers. That was their second worst half of the weekend, right? Like, they just needed more in these second halves, but their defense fell apart. And some of it is the lineups getting adjusted to with their new groups, and some of it is that they were playing teams that were more talented than them. But in the end, it all came down to their defense. And I think this is kind of something they're trying to figure out, is what lineups do and don't give them good defensive success. But the problem for figuring that stuff out is, against the Celtics, it was obvious to me, at least, their starters were the group defending poorly. Single game plus minus is finicky, but where it does help you, or can help you, is all 5 starters, big negatives in the Pacers-Celtics game, right? Nesmith was the best at -12. But the bench, much better, a little better. Buddy Hield only -6, -8 for Nwora, right? Those guys kept the Pacers in it, at least. Did a little bit better, especially in the second quarter, to give them a lead, right? That group defended a little better in that particular game. The Hawks, opposite story. Bench guys, Buddy Hield, -20, McConnell, -16, Smith, -17. That group they got smoked, especially in that third quarter when the Hawks kind of blew this game open. Whereas the starters, Andrew Nembhard +5, Isaiah Jackson +4, Aaron Nesmith +8, right? The mixing and matching hurt them a little more in this game because Haliburton and Mathurin were minuses, but it was 2 different groups that struggled. So you don't learn as much about what defensive issues you had, but what the Pacers did see is an inability to go 48 minutes of figuring out what worked for them in this game. And look, Nwora being hot certainly kept them afloat, and Duarte was playing in the first half and then left the game. Who knows, but his ankle soreness must be rough. So they didn't learn a lot there, but the big takeaway from the Pacers games this weekend is their second halves were miserable. They've got to defend for 48 minutes. That is where they look a little better, right? Giving up that many points in a half to the Celtics and their bench guys is brutal. Giving up that many points to the Hawks when Trae Young misses a bunch of the game, giving up 143 in general tells you everything you need to know about that Atlanta game. Pacers are 0-11 when they give up more than 130 this season. That's the second most they've given up in a game, and it was in regulation. They gave up a ton to the Celtics in both halves. Just not a good defensive weekend for the Pacers. I believe now, after the second game they played against the Hawks, they were second to last in defensive ratings since the All-Star break. Not defending well. They have to defend better and figure out some defensive principles before the season ends. I believe the Spurs dipped back below them in defensive rating since then, but at the time they were second worst. And it really showed in these second halves, costing the Pacers games. They've now clinched a losing record for this season, but still clinging to potential play in life with 7 games to go. I know most people do not want to see them in there. We'll do standings watch tomorrow because the Pacers and Bulls do play tonight. Pacers against the Mavs at home, Bulls in LA against the Clippers. And it could be literally the last breaths of play-in we're talking about. Tomorrow we'll do standings watch tomorrow. After Pacers Mavs, we'll talk about the game, any key stories from that game, and then close out with standings watch. Because the Cavs clinched a playoff berth this weekend, so the Pacers locked up another pick. Where do the Pacers stand in their plan? Push all the rest of their picks, all that stuff. We'll do it as we have every single week. And as the week progresses, lots of fun content coming. We've got a lot of fun, interesting stuff planned about duos, the Pacers opponents, all sorts of stuff. So thank you guys a ton for listening today. Hope you had a wonderful weekend enjoying the Pacers in March Madness. We will see you tomorrow.